For decades, Maury Povich stood at the center of family truth and DNA revelations. Calm voice, one envelope, and a sentence that could change lives forever. But some stories never made it to that famous stage. Some truths were too heavy, even for the brightest studio lights. This is one of those stories. Let me explain. I know the title sounds confusing. My sister's husband cheated on me. How is that possible? He wasn't my husband. He was married to my sister. But for 3 years, he was also mine. And neither of us knew the other existed. My name is Rebecca. I met Daniel at a conference in Chicago. I was 31 years old, a marketing executive for a tech company based in Seattle. He was 34, a financial consultant from, he told me, Boston. He was charming, funny, attentive in a way that most men aren't. He remembered the little things, my coffee order, my favorite flowers, the way I liked my eggs in the morning. We started dating that weekend. Long distance, he said. His job kept him traveling constantly, but he would fly to Seattle whenever he could, and I believed him. For 3 years, I believed everything. We saw each other twice a month, sometimes more, sometimes less. He would text me every morning and call me every night. He sent flowers on my birthday, my work anniversary, random Tuesdays when he was thinking about me. I introduced him to my friends. They loved him. My mother loved him. Everyone kept asking when he was going to propose. I wondered the same thing. But every time I brought up the future, moving in together, getting engaged, starting a family, Daniel would deflect. He would say he wasn't ready, that his job was too demanding, that we should enjoy what we had without rushing. I told myself he just needed time. Some men are slow to commit. It didn't mean he didn't love me. I was so naive. I found out the truth at my sister's wedding. My younger sister, Caroline, had been dating someone for 2 years, a man she met at a charity gala in New York, a financial consultant who traveled constantly for work. I had never met him. Caroline lived in Manhattan, and I was always busy with my own relationship. We talked on the phone regularly, but our lives were separate, parallel tracks that rarely intersected. When she called to tell me she was engaged, I was thrilled. When she sent me the wedding invitation, I circled the date on my calendar. When she asked me to be her maid of honor, I cried happy tears. I didn't know I was about to cry. Very different tears. The wedding was in the Hamptons, a beautiful venue overlooking the ocean. White chairs arranged on a manicured lawn, flowers everywhere. The kind of wedding little girls dream about. I arrived the day before for the rehearsal dinner. Caroline had arranged for the wedding party to stay at a nearby hotel. I checked in, freshened up, and headed to the venue. I was running late. The rehearsal had already started by the time I arrived. I slipped through the back entrance, trying not to disturb anyone, looking for Caroline. I found her standing at the altar, next to Daniel. I didn't understand at first. My brain couldn't process what my eyes were seeing. My Daniel, was standing at the altar with my sister, holding her hands, smiling at her the way he used to smile at me. I thought it was a mistake. A coincidence. Maybe he was a groomsman. Maybe he knew the groom. Maybe there was some explanation that would make sense. But then the officiant spoke. And Daniel, do you take Caroline to be your lawfully wedded wife? Daniel, my sister's fiance, the same person. I must have made a sound, a gasp, a strangled cry, something involuntary that escaped my throat before I could stop it, because suddenly everyone was turning to look at me. Caroline, Daniel, the wedding party, the few guests who had arrived early for the rehearsal. Daniel's face went white. The color drained from his cheeks like someone had pulled a plug. His mouth opened, but no words came out. Caroline looked confused, then concerned, then suspicious. Rebecca, what's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost. I couldn't speak. I couldn't breathe. My legs felt like they were made of water. I grabbed the back of a nearby chair just to stay upright. Daniel stepped forward, his hands raised like he was approaching a wild animal. Rebecca, let me explain. You know my sister? Caroline's voice was sharp now, dangerous. How do you know my sister? Daniel! Daniel didn't answer. And in that terrible, endless silence, I watched understanding dawn on my sister's face. The rehearsal dinner was canceled. What followed was chaos, pure, unfiltered chaos. Caroline was screaming, the kind of primal, guttural screaming that comes from a place of total devastation. I was crying, though I couldn't remember when the tears started. Daniel was trying to explain himself, his words tumbling over each other in a desperate flood of excuses and justifications. But nothing he said made any sense. He had been seeing both of us. For 3 years, using the same lies, the same manipulations, the same "I travel constantly for work" cover story that kept us both completely in the dark. When he was in Seattle with me, he told Caroline he was consulting for a client in the Pacific Northwest. When he was in New York with her, he told me he was working on a project in the Northeast. He had 2 phones, 2 email addresses, 2 carefully constructed identities. 2 women who loved him with their whole hearts, and neither of us had any idea the other existed. Until now, Caroline slapped him hard across the face. The sound echoed through the venue like a gunshot. 3 years? She screamed. You've been sleeping with my sister for 3 years? It's not what you think. Then what is it? What could it possibly be? Daniel had no answer, because there was no answer. There was no explanation that could justify what he had done. He had lied to both of us. He had manipulated both of us. He had built 2 separate relationships on a foundation of complete deception. And now, both foundations were crumbling. The wedding was called off. Of course it was. Caroline couldn't marry a man who had been cheating on her with her own sister. The guests were sent home. The flowers were donated. The cake was never cut. Everything Caroline had dreamed of, the white dress, the vows, the happily ever after, was destroyed in a single afternoon. And somehow, impossibly, she blamed me. You should have known. Those were her words, screamed at me through tears in the hotel room that night. You should have known something was wrong. You should have figured it out. How could you not see it? Caroline, I didn't know he was my fiancé. You were sleeping with my fiancé. I didn't know he was your fiancé. I thought he was my boyfriend. You introduced me to him at Christmas 3 years ago. I froze. Christmas 3 years ago. I remembered that dinner, a big family gathering at our parents' house. I had brought Daniel. He had charmed everyone. My parents, my aunts and uncles, my grandparents, and Caroline. I remembered them talking in the kitchen. I thought they were just getting to know each other. Brother and sister-in-law bonding, I had called it. But that wasn't what was happening. That was when it started. Daniel had met us both at the same dinner. He had been my boyfriend first. I had brought him home to meet the family, proud to show off this charming, successful man who seemed to adore me. Everyone loved him. My parents, my aunts and uncles, my grandmother, who was usually impossible to impress, and Caroline. I remembered them talking in the kitchen while I helped my mother with dessert. I thought they were just getting to know each other. Daniel was making an effort to bond with my family, I told myself. Brother and sister-in-law bonding, I called it in my head, but that wasn't what was happening. That was when it started. He got her number that night. He reached out a week later, texting her that he was visiting New York for work and would love to get coffee. Just as friends, he said. Just to stay connected to Rebecca's family. She didn't tell me because she didn't want to make it awkward. He was my boyfriend, and she didn't want me to think she was overstepping. Besides, it was just coffee. What harm could come from coffee? But 1 coffee became 2. 2 became dinner. Dinner became something else entirely. And by the time 6 months had passed, my sister was in love with the same man I was in love with. Neither of us knew about the other. He had orchestrated everything perfectly. I lost my sister that night. She couldn't look at me. She couldn't speak to me. She blamed me for bringing Daniel into her life, even though I was just as much a victim as she was. I tried to explain. I tried to apologize for something that wasn't my fault. I begged her to understand that I had been deceived too. But grief doesn't listen to logic. Pain doesn't care about fairness. Caroline needed someone to blame, and I was easier to hate than the man who had fooled us both. I flew back to Seattle alone. I had arrived expecting to celebrate my sister's wedding. I left with no sister at all. Daniel tried to call me 73 times in the following week. He sent emails. He sent flowers. He even showed up at my apartment building, buzzing my intercom until security escorted him away. I didn't respond to any of it. There was nothing left to say. 6 months passed. 6 months of silence. 6 months of estrangement. 6 months of holidays skipped and birthdays ignored and family group chats where my name was carefully avoided. I had never felt so alone. My parents tried to mediate. They called both of us separately, begging us to reconcile. They invited both of us to Thanksgiving, hoping we could put aside our anger over turkey and stuffing and pumpkin pie. Caroline refused to come if I was there, so I stayed home. I ate frozen pizza and watched old movies alone in my apartment, trying not to think about everything I had lost, trying not to picture my family gathered around the dining room table without me, passing dishes and sharing laughter while I sat in silence 3,000 miles away. And then the DNA results arrived. I hadn't taken a DNA test. I had no reason to, but Caroline had, one of those ancestry kits that were popular on social media. She wanted to learn about our heritage, our background, where our family came from. What she found was something else entirely. Caroline called me for the first time in 6 months. Her voice was strange, hollow, like someone who had just received devastating news and hadn't processed it yet. "I need to talk to you," she said, "in person. Can you come to New York?" "Caroline, what's going on?" "Just come, please." I booked a flight that night. We met at a coffee shop near her apartment. She looked different, thinner, older. The past 6 months had aged her in ways I couldn't describe. She slid a piece of paper across the table. "Look at this." It was her DNA results, ethnicity estimates, genetic matches, the usual information those tests provide. "What am I looking at?" Caroline pointed to a section labeled DNA relatives. There was a match at the top of the list. Someone with 25% shared DNA. The relationship estimate read half-sibling. "I don't have a half-sibling," Caroline said. "Unless—" I looked at the name of the match. I didn't recognize it. But when Caroline pulled up the profile photo, my blood ran cold. The woman in the picture looked exactly like us. Same nose, same eyes, same distinctive chin that everyone said we inherited from our grandmother. We had a sister we never knew about, a half-sister, born 35 years ago, given up for adoption, raised by a family in Oregon. Our father's daughter from an affair he had before we were born. An affair with a woman named Linda, Daniel's mother. I know, it's a lot. Let me explain. 35 years ago, our father had an affair. The woman got pregnant and gave the baby up for adoption. Our father never knew about the child. The affair ended. He married our mother, and we were born a few years later. Meanwhile, Daniel's mother, Linda, had her own history. She had been involved with our father briefly before meeting her husband. Daniel never knew any of this. When Daniel met me at that conference in Chicago, he had no idea we shared a biological connection. When he met Caroline at Christmas dinner, he didn't know she was also his half-sister's sister. None of us knew until the DNA test revealed everything. Daniel wasn't just a cheater, he was family. Distantly, biologically, technically. He was connected to us through a half-sister none of us knew existed. The man who had deceived us both, who had built 2 relationships on lies, who had destroyed my bond with my sister, he was part of our family tree. It didn't excuse what he did. It didn't make the betrayal any less painful, but it added a layer of tragedy that none of us expected. Caroline and I are speaking again. It took time, months of therapy, painful conversations where we both said things we regretted, but eventually we found our way back to each other. Not because of Daniel, despite him. We realized that he had taken enough from us. Our trust, our peace, our sense of security. We weren't going to let him take our sisterhood too. We've met our half-sister now. Her name is Michelle. She's 35, a veterinarian in Portland, and she looks so much like us, it's almost unsettling. She grew up knowing she was adopted. She took the DNA test hoping to find her birth family. She found us instead. Daniel disappeared. After everything came out, he moved, changed his number, deleted his social media, vanished like a ghost. I don't know where he is now. I don't care. Some people leave scars that never fully heal, but they also teach you things about trust, about family, about the people worth keeping in your life. Daniel taught me that my sister is worth fighting for, even when everything else falls apart. For decades, Maury Povich stood at the center of family truth and DNA revelations. Calm voice, one envelope, and a sentence that could change lives forever. But this story didn't need a stage. It only needed 2 sisters who refused to let a cheater tear them apart, and a DNA test that revealed a family bigger than any of them imagined.